The reason I asked the folks from Enterprise to come and talk about this, I heard Mike talk about it at a conference, at the API conference last spring, and he was pretty convinced that the mailing of the brochure and then the big uptick in the use of the map viewer were pretty related. And I guess you guys have just done or about to do another big mailing, so it'll probably confirm that belief one way or another. One of the things we've heard over and over again as we reach out to members of the public is, that's one of the questions. They just want to know what pipelines are near them or where they are. We also hear, and I think Cynthia Quarterman mentioned it too, that there's lots of information available, but people get frustrated because it's hard to kind of find all the information that's available. And this whole GIS map viewer system seems to be the way to tie all those things together. So over the past few months, we've been asking citizen advocates that we know of around the country, what is the information, what is the data you're interested in? So we kind of compiled a list of the things that are interested in. So what I'm going to talk about today a little bit is kind of what a citizen dream system that takes the enterprise system even farther would look like. And then everybody can say, well, we can't do that because TSA won't let us. Just a little bit of how we came about this is one of the things working with advocates around the country over the past year or so. One of the advocates we ran into lives in the Fort Worth area, and she had called me and was relating issues she had about pipelines around her house. So, and it's pretty amazing, anybody that plays with Google Earth or Bing or any of those, what you can do now these days. I know with my county commissioner hat on, our planning department uses some of those things to know if people are putting additions on their house without getting permits. You can get to that level of detail looking at some of those maps. Well, so Mary, who is one of the advocates from Fort Worth, called me up, so I just started looking through the Bing and the Google Earth maps, and this is kind of a map of where she lives. Her house is this house right here in Fort Worth, and she kind of runs a little operation that kind of a farm operation there and sells animals to the public. When I backed out and looked, and all this stuff is all publicly available, and anybody that lives in Fort Worth knows it's in the middle of one of the gas production areas. So Mary's house is the blue dot, and all of these circles here are well pads that surround her house now. So it's new gas production in the area. And you know that somehow those well pads are all tied together with pipelines. She also had a concern about whatever this was here. She knew it, and it was making weird noises, kind of freaking her out, and she was having a hard time getting answers for people. Even with Bing, you can get a pretty good view of what that information is there. So, lots of times you hear all these concerns about security, but a lot of this stuff is out there anyway. Stumbled upon the Enterprise Map Viewer because she'd mentioned this was an Enterprise pipeline, so I went to the website and found the map viewer, and I was just tickled to death because put her address in, and sure enough, that's exactly where she lives, and there was the Enterprise pipeline running past it. And just as Amber said, there was some valuable information here about the diameter of the pipeline. We didn't have that information, so it provided her with more information on what was in the pipeline, and even provided some of the health information that citizens are really interested in, what's in the pipeline and what might be the health impacts of that. So that was a good thing. But I knew there was other mapping sources too, so I started trying to compare those. So I went to the National Pipeline Mapping System that PHMSA runs and put in the address and came up with this. So it still shows the Enterprise map, the blue line there, but it also shows a crude oil map running past there, and the information on the bottom is the information, if you query the National Pipeline Mapping System, that citizens can get. So it told me that the crude oil pipeline was a Sunoco pipeline that was in service. It's an interstate pipeline, and it gave a little bit of information. It doesn't even provide the size of the pipeline, so Enterprise has gone farther than the National Pipeline Mapping System has for that. I also knew, because of stuff we'd done in Fort Worth, that the Texas Railroad Commission has a pretty robust mapping system. Not the least bit user-friendly, I will say that, but they have a very robust system. So I went in and looked at their system, and for the exact same address, there's Mary's house again in the middle. There's the Enterprise pipeline. This green pipeline down the side over here is the Sunoco crude pipeline. But the Texas Railroad Commission shows probably 5 or 6 other pipelines surrounding Mary's house. Some of them, the gathering lines from those different wells I showed. Some of them, I was surprised. This is a gas transmission line. There's transmission lines up here, and supposedly all the transmission lines are supposed to be on the National Pipeline Mapping System. And these ones weren't showing up on the NPMS. So we asked PHMSA and the Railroad Commission, what's the deal? Why are some of the pipelines on NPMS and not, and who's got it correct and not in? We still, 6 months later, haven't got an answer to that. They're still trying to figure that out. The other thing we found out through the Railroad Commission and through this was that I think it was this pipeline here that's a gas transmission pipeline was an intrastate pipeline for a while, and then the company, for whatever reason, changed it to an interstate pipeline, which means the authority should have shifted from the Railroad Commission to PHMSA, because the Railroad Commission doesn't do interstate. So we asked both of those organizations, how does that handoff of authority work? And we haven't got an answer to that yet either. The Railroad Commission says, we don't let PHMSA know. We know that the company changed from intra to inter, but there's no communication between the state and the feds about that. And I think the best answer we've got from the feds so far is when they do their annual reports, the company would report that. So anyway, just some background information. But it shows kind of the confusion, and Enterprise has done a good job of making the point that our system is only showing the Enterprise pipelines. It's not showing what else might be around you. And currently, you know, you can get 3 different maps that show you 3 different versions, and it causes a little more confusion. I'm getting to the point where I'm going to fail on my technology here, but we're going to try. So I'm going to put up what the citizens have kind of decided would be a dream system. And this is my house. This is where I live up in Washington. And you can see I live kind of in a rural area. We've got a salmon stream in our backyard running through there. Now we're going to pretend that when I went to the NPMS and brought up the maps that I have 2 pipelines near my house, which I don't have. That's why I made up these phony names of apple pie and motherhood pipelines running through here. This being a crude oil pipeline and this being a gas pipeline supposedly running by my house. What we'd love to see the NPMS pulling all this information together do is you'd click over here on the side for the information like you can already on the NPMS site for some basic information, but instead of just getting a contact and what kind of pipeline it would be, you'd get a whole range of information. And this is the information that the citizens around the country have told us they're very much interested in. I'm kind of going to go by those. And a lot of it, and just about everything on this list, is already publicly available somewhere in the PHMSA website or in state websites or stuff, but you have to go 47 different places to find it. If all the GIS data could be incorporated into one system where you just go through the mapping system to find this, it would be great. So you'd look and you find the name of the Apple Pie Express pipeline, and it's run by Good Guys LLC. And you know, over here for more information, there would be a direct link to their website, so you can find out about who the company was and all that. The contact information is just as it would be now on the NPMS. You get that anyway. But there would be a more information page, and this is where we'll see how this works. So if you went and clicked over on the more information page, it would bring up the PHMSA website about, you know, recognizing and responding to pipelines. Okay, well, crude oil. You know, it tells basically crude oil. One of the things we've heard from citizens over and over again is they like a little more specificity than just crude oil. What type of crude oil is it and where is it coming from? You know, there's lots of issues around dilbit these days, and is that crude oil or not? So if it was even specified that. But then over here on the side, you know, you would click for more information, and this is all stuff that's already out there somewhere. PHMSA's got some great fact sheets hidden deeply in their stakeholders' website that talks about all the different types of products that are contained. So not only can you find out specifically what's in the pipeline running near you, but you also would be able to find out more information if you wanted to educate yourself better. Moving on down the list, you know, people are very interested in the size of the pipeline, and some companies like Enterprise is already providing that. People are very interested in the pressure too, and I think we're getting into one of those things where people start getting a little squeamish about, can we tell people the pressure? Some of the companies are providing that now. I think Marathon on their site provides some information about, you know, the public is very interested in both the maximum operating pressure, the maximum allowable operating pressure for gas pipelines, but also just kind of what the normal operating pressure is, because oftentimes, especially gathering lines in Texas, you may have an MAOP that would be 1,400, but they're really operating at 200 psi. So the safety factor built into that type of difference is pretty huge. So providing both of those things. Years installed is interesting to people. We'd love to see a fact sheet on how does age matter when it comes to pipelines, and we heard a little bit about that yesterday, that if a pipeline is properly maintained and operated, age is not as important as if it's not. So age itself may not be the determining factor, and it'd be great if there was a link there that would help inform people of that. There's always interest in what kind of pipe is in the ground, how thick it is, who the manufacturer was, what the type of weld is. And that would certainly have to lead to a link that would explain that, because mostly the public doesn't know what an ERW weld is or those different things. PHMSA already has a fact sheet on their website about pipe manufacturing process and the different types. Easy link, all tied together in one place. What else is the public interested in? There's lots of interest in high consequence areas. Am I in one or not? Because there's enough information, people know that that's important about how their pipeline's being operated and maintained. And PHMSA, to their credit, if it'll work one more time, has a great fact sheet that describes how high consequence areas are determined, what the factors are in that. So first of all, you just learn if you had one or not specifically on your pipeline, and then you could read more about it and what that means. And the public, the next line down there, is very interested, especially with liquid pipelines, about unusually sensitive areas, wetlands, navigable waterways, those types of things. We'd like to see that, and that's one thing that's kind of missing on the PHMSA website as far as we can tell at this point. And that stuff isn't available. If you go to the NPMS now, you can kind of get the populated areas that help determine high consequence areas for natural gas pipelines, but USAs are really important for liquid pipelines, and that information isn't available on NPMS at this point. Moving down the list, people were really interested in the depth of cover. Depth of cover has been an issue. So on the specific website, perhaps a company could provide what the depth of cover was when it was installed. You really need a fact sheet then on the depth of cover, because people don't understand that it's the depth of the cover at the time it was installed, not what it might be at 40 years later. So there needs to be an explanation to people of why it might have been 4 feet deep to begin with, but now it's only 2 feet deep. I keep having to turn around and look because this screen we forgot our eyeglasses. People are interested in creek crossings. If you remember my map, I had a stream crossing there for the apple pie pipeline. Whether it's an open cut or HDD, that type of information is available. That would lead to another fact sheet on types of stream crossings. And then we get into the specific information people were interested in, such as local emergency training. People told us they would be interested whether they're firefighters in the area or whether they're local emergency planners have been contacted. And I know companies reach out to all those types of groups every year or every couple of years because the companies are required by regulations to reach out to those groups. Those groups aren't required by regulations to pay any attention. So what the public is interested in is, have our firefighters actually attended trainings? Has there been meetings between the local emergency response and the company? Because that would be interesting to the public and may help the public encourage their local government to get more informed about such things. And finally, we get into a whole bunch of things on inspections and that could be very specific to the companies, and PHMSA provides a whole lot of this information on their website. We'll try to see if it works. Like they talk about what inspections are, how federal inspections work, how state inspections work. There's information, come on, you can do it, information about, we'll see what the next one is I have a live link for here. Well, I thought I had more live links. I think I'm just to the, okay, you can do it. Oh, I froze the screen. It'll take a second. I think it'll wake back up. Lots of information about enforcement incidents, inspections. Oh, come on. And I had examples. Here we go. This is information on inspections. It's all on the PHMSA website now, both specific to the company, so you would pipe in the Apple Pie Express pipeline and you would find out the different types of inspections, when they incurred, and you can find out whether, enforcement cases came out of that. You go back to the list. You'd be interested in just general information on the pipeline. This is all provided on the PHMSA website already. Talks about the different types of pipelines the company has in different areas. It tells how many miles in different states, the total mileage, what the different products are in the pipelines. There's a wealth of information already available, and hardly anybody knows where to find it or to draw it all together. Back to the click, you'd click again if you wanted to find incidents information. So you can find out that the Apple Pie Express has had this many incidents causing $11 million worth of property damage to help the public judge for how safe do they feel. Is it and if you go to the PHMSA website, then you can compare it to the national data. So you can compare your local pipeline to maybe the national information to decide how the local company compares to the national information. And the final click would take you to actually the enforcement cases. So you could see what kind of enforcement the federal government has been doing. And you can see that the Apple Pie pipeline here had a number of enforcement cases. All this stuff is already publicly available thanks to the PHMSA's efforts and transparency over the last few years, but this would tie it all together. So that's really what we heard from the public, and I think the GIS has the ability to tie this all together in one place, but no one's pulled that off yet to my knowledge, although it sounds like Washington State is getting close in some ways with their GIS system. So we've been kind of trolling this idea out. The public people that we described this to were pretty excited that they could find everything and with just clicking their mouse from one site. We talked to some industry folks about it too, and there was quite a bit of interest because everybody's struggling with how do you get information out easily. And that's led to a proposal that the Pipeline Safety Trust and the Inga Foundation put together with the University of Michigan. Now, it's not for the dream site that I'm talking about. It's a much smaller starting point than that. But we've recently just submitted this to the University of Michigan. They do these graduate programs each year where interdisciplinary teams of GIS students and public awareness students and behavior change students work together to try to create cool things. And we've got a lot of partners, so we're kind of going to try to design a pilot system like what I described, more constrained for Michigan or the Great Lakes area if we get chosen by the University of Michigan to do this system. And hopefully, our partners in this are a number of the pipelines in Michigan, Marathon Pipelines, Enbridge, TransCanada runs natural gas pipelines there. Inga's already devoted some money to help pay for whatever the students need on this, as well as the trust. API, AOPL, and PHMSA have all offered to, help advise on this if it gets chosen as one of the projects. So hopefully next year, probably 2 years from now at the conference, perhaps we can show you the whiz-bang system that comes out of this if some of the companies that I know are working on some similar things don't beat us to it.